and that as he calls them into a followership relationship, he gives them a servanthood relationship back. He didn't call them to follow him and then serve him as they follow him. He called them to follow him, and then he served them as they followed. It is an incredible model of leadership, that if you follow, it is my responsibility to serve. So I have to put myself in a follower, in a servanthood model, if I'm going to serve like Jesus. So the question is, what are we willing to sacrifice in order to follow? What are we willing to sacrifice? And here are some of the implications of this question. You gotta be willing to be involved in something that you are willing to be sold out for, that you're willing to totally commit to. It's the first implication of this, that if the servanthood example that Jesus is calling us to is an example that we will sail out to, Jesus sold out to it even to the point of his very life. And what you'll find is that the apostles did too. I've talked about this in the past, the horrible deaths that the disciples died, and all they had to do was to stop preaching Jesus, to stop telling others about the goodness of the Lord, to stop demonstrating a life that looked like Christ, and they would be spared death. And they sold out, even to the point of their own deaths. The leader must also, if you're a follower, you got to be willing to totally commit. And the leader must also be willing to totally commit, because we can never, if we lead, ask people to do what we are unwilling to do. We cannot ask people who follow us to do what we are unwilling to do. And then, as followers, we must be challenged to give all that have. We got to be willing to give this united effort. We got to, as a group, and that's why I believe he calls them all together, because we can accomplish so much more together than we can ever accomplish apart. So we're in this moment in Mark 10 that has the potential to divide the group. And Jesus calls them to say, as leaders, as followers, you got to totally commit. As leaders, you got to watch me as I totally commit. But you also have to be willing to commit in a unified way. Because if we allow the group to fracture, we become less and less effective in what we're called to do. And then the last point I want to make is, where do we look for our leaders? Where should we look for them? And I want to read something for this piece. It says, true leadership is not a matter of having a title, a position, or an overwhelming personality. Leadership is first and foremost a matter of the heart. Who is the leader we need? Think about this even today in the world that we have. What kind of leader do we need today? And I answer the way the writer of this piece that I'm reading now answers. We need leaders who are servants. Find the servant and you found the leader. If you find those who are willing to serve, that's where you find leaders. this individual is not the big shot that's sitting at the head of the table. He's probably the one serving the meal in the kitchen. Where should we be looking for our leaders today? We look at models of leadership around our world today. Look at the world we're in now, with the leadership models that we read about and all of these well-known, well-read, well-publicized leadership writers. And people are adopting the leadership models that come out of all of these books that are being written. And with all of these folk who are following the principles of leadership that are found in all of these other books. And it looks like our world is falling apart. We can look at it in our own country, but look around the world as well. Tell me where it's being done well, and I'll tell you to follow that leadership model. But the leadership model that Jesus gives, when people follow that model the way he's taught us to follow that model, then nobody is left out. We're in models right now of leadership where I want to win at the expense of everybody else. That's not Jesus's model. Jesus's model says that leadership model is disqualified. He tells them that leadership model, he says, you know how when the Gentiles, they lord it over each other. You know how it's done in the world, but that will not be the case with you. That model does not work in the kingdom. And so then he tells them there's a different way. Serve to lead. Serve as you lead. And then he doesn't only tell them, he shows them. He shows them with his own lifestyle. He feeds them. He takes care of their needs. He makes sure they are well. He teaches them. He models what he teaches. He gives this incredible lesson to them, but then by extension to the rest of us. And if we're going to lead in a way that matters, if we're going to lead in a way that takes care of others, the only model that works is the Jesus model. We look at the models around the world and we see wars all around as people are trying to take what others have and make their lives worse to the benefit of others. We look around the world and we'll see people enslaving one another, putting others at a disadvantage so that they can benefit. You look around the world in models of leadership and you'll find people pass laws that are beneficial to certain groups of people to the detriment of others. The models of leadership that we see in the world are models that benefit certain groups at the expense of others, benefit certain countries at the expense of others, but do not benefit the whole, but only benefits the minority. So I challenge us today to understand that Jesus is letting us know that that model does not work. We need a leadership model that is concerned about everybody. And not just concerned about the people in our own individual circles, but we have to understand the way another model of servanthood that we learned through Dr. Martin Luther King, that what affects you directly affects me indirectly. And I can't just simply close my doors and inoculate myself from your problems, because your problems become my problems. And in order for us to do well, I'm gonna say it that way, in order for us to do well, us has to do well. We all have to do well. And if we're not all doing well, then none of us are doing well. We've got to be willing and look at the models that Jesus showed us. Look at the model of the disciples in Acts chapter 2, in the early chapters of Acts, as they begin to have all things in common. and to make sure that needs didn't go unmet, to make sure that people didn't go hungry, to make sure that people didn't go unclothed, to make sure that people did not go with their needs unmet. And when the groups got too large for the apostles to handle it themselves, they began to maximize ministry, and they created deacons, and they created other structures inside of ministry to be able to take care of people because they got it. They understood what Jesus had taught them. And the question today for each of us is we've got to understand it as well, so that we maximize ministry in a way that we are leveraging what we have to the benefit of the entire group. We understand that if you are hungry, I'm hungry too. If you are homeless, I'm also homeless. And I've got to make sure that my heart, that I don't just have compassion. I talked about this in a sermon a couple weeks ago. That I don't just have compassion, but that I am moved with compassion. That compassion moves me to an action that addresses the thing that I am compassionate about. Amen. Amen.